What else does a Texan do with 2 microphones? I got my 6 guns on, folks, so I'm ready to go. It's a little warm in here. I want to get comfortable. Turn the speakers on. Anyway, I sure do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk and visit with y'all today about strip tillage and what I think is some of the exciting things that Orthman Manufacturing is doing with their strip tillage research. We have 18 universities from New York, Florida, California, North Dakota to Texas that we're doing research plots on with strip tillage and our equipment. We've also got in Hungary about 90, and I'm going to call them demonstration plots. If there's any Hungarians in the group, I better say research plots. But so anyway, we're really excited what we're doing and the exciting things that we're finding about strip tillage. So just got back from Hungary and kind of a whirlwind tour with about 5 countries. And when you get out of the U.S. government and get into private enterprise, they really like to work you. I didn't realize how soft it was in the government. But so anyway, it was kind of fun, and we did a lot of talking and visiting, and things were getting kind of dull and dry. And we were over in Ukraine at Kyiv, and they brought in this very large producer. I think he had something like 70,000 hectares, and brought in his staff, and it was real nice and stuffy, and everybody hadn't broke the ice. Well, he was about my age. He had the same beautiful hairline I've got. We had the same amount of gray hair, gray whiskers on our face and whatnot. And I looked over at him and I said, I sure do like your bald head. It's really nice. He kind of looks at me, you know. Of course, the interpreter's trying to keep up with me. And I said, yeah, this is a solar panel for a sex machine. Well, the interpreter, my bosses at Orthman, they all froze because they didn't know how he was going to react. Well, one of the gentlemen that was his staff was the only one that knew English. He started laughing really hard. Then he told the landowner what I'd said, and he started laughing. And then all of a sudden, the interpreter and the rest of my bosses, they all got comfortable because I was trying to break the ice with these guys. So anyway, let's get started on my presentation. Anytime you want to ask a question, please do so. There'll also be discussions at the end. So anyway, let's talk about strip tillage. It's a systematic look. And like I said, we have 18 of these research plots with major universities across the country. We're looking at corn, soybeans, cotton, and grain sorghum. And today what we want to present is a different offer to you, a different approach. It's starting with a more amicable root zone and preparing that seed bed in a good environment where you get good seed soil contact. We want you to look and consider the fertilizer nutrient aspects of that and some of the soybean physiological concepts. And we've also done some studies on row spacing and population, and we're trying to put that all together and discuss soybean health. In soybean culture, things can be changed from its roots up, and that's where we as agronomists, particularly the ones that are soil scientists that work where we go to jump in holes and we're counting roots and root pores and worms and those kinds of things. This is where we look at, and this is where we think you have to start at a different approach and to see how this window is going to work for making that a stronger plant. And both of these plants up here is some strong nodulation under strip tillage, and just a general picture of what we've seen in some of our studies with strip tillage. Next. Fertilizer placement. We have found that properly placing fertilizer will make significant gains. It's been our observations from the 1980s to now that fertilizer gives a great advantage when you place it strategically in the root pathway. We've discovered that soybeans produce a larger and a more extensive, deeper root system that's more robust and more extensive in obtaining nutrients and water when being precisely placed. And normally with the strip tillage equipment, we're looking at placing at 2 different levels of fertilizer at 4 inches and at 10 inches. Soybean physiological demands include node development, flower development, and number of pods and beans. We want to accentuate a deeper root exploration of the soil profile. We want to improve production potential and offer a better, healthier plant all season long. So why do we place the nutrients in this path? Knowing that soybeans are very light dependent, the month of August, and when the axis nodes and buds develop, nutrient availability is agronomically extremely important. Our findings at our research farm in Lexington, Nebraska, we have a 380 research farm, and we've just increased another 3,500 acres where we're doing research there in Lexington. These findings have shown that indicate the placement of P, K, and S, the microbes, and some nitrogen will yield steadily to improving yields, particularly in soybeans as well as other crops. Placement. We've had Colorado, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Iowa where we've used precision placement to enhance root development. We provided more P and K in those microbes, and zinc, copper, boron, and manganese when the plant demands are the highest. And all of this with strip tillage we're doing with RTK and guidance system, because we found that the further out that you move these nutrients away from the plant, we're losing production. So it's important to state that precision-based application will provide larger root zones, allowed us to decrease application rates of N, P, and K, and we've reduced phosphorus amounts after 3 years by 30%, potassium by 35 to 50%, and nitrogen by 50%. And we have steadily improved yields just with utilizing strip tillage equipment, the right equipment, and using RTK guidance and doing it properly placed in that soil profile. And that's how we've increased this effectiveness and efficiency. So when is the fertilizer timing factor working? We're looking at pre-plant in our studies prior to canopy closure of early R1 and R2 stages. And another opportunity is when we apply fungicides that are applied. Next. And so here are some of the results we want to offer up to you. That you get a better plant root dimension, plant development, and differences in the plant population compared to the conventional tillage wisdom that we see today. Next. Here are some of the treatment of fertilizer applications that we did. The maturity, the maximum rooting after 55 days after emergence, 110 days after emergence. Some columns that I think are extremely important, this inches of primary root development, where those major nutrients of that and the major root of that plant, the depth of the first lateral, the depth of the second lateral of the soybean plant, and the third lateral, and the number of pods, and then on to the number of branches per plant, but even more importantly that y'all would be interested in is the yield or bushels per acre. So all the above data is from 2011. Our planting population was 90,000 seeds per acre, and the final stand count was 84 to 86 plants per acre. And so we got some pretty nice yields. We're not going along there and using hedgerow and cutting tops and using flail mowers on our soybeans to get these high world production levels. So in comparison of the plots, we have conventional tillage. We compare drilling soybeans with 6, 7, 7.5, 10, and 15-inch row spacing. We had a higher seed population of 140,000 to 220,000. We had crop rotations of corn and soybeans. We're usually fertilizing for corn and soybeans prior to the planting of the corn crop. and dry fertilizer is a common source of material for the fertilizer. In strip tillage, we're using row spacing of 20 or 30 inches. We're making changes in seeding, planting rates, and final seeding populations. We also are strong believers in wise crop rotations to keep that organic matter and keeping that soil health up. And then fertilizer sources, using more with liquid products and foliar products. And we are strong believers in using very high-grade fertilizers and foliar products. We have found them to make a big difference, as well as using low-salt fertilizers. Again, this is in Lexington, Nebraska from 2006 to 2011. The hybrid types that we had, the population, irrigated versus non-irrigated, as you can see on the charts here, and the yields. But basically from 2006 to 2011, we went on 56 bushels of irrigated in 2006 to 88 bushels per acre. In 2011, on dry land, it went from 42 to 62. So we're pretty excited about those yields, and the bottom line is when it gets to the management, they're making some money off of these farms, which is a real nice deal. Yes, sir.
Are these on 30-inch centers or 15s or?
30.
30s? Okay, those are the final stands as far as population?
Yes. So in summary of what we looked at, and one of the things that we're really interested in is getting a good seed bed. We're after this compaction of the soil where you have a plow pan or that's developed particularly with conventional tillage. We're really into watching that bulk density and counting those root pores. We have found that there's certain different sizes that occur when you have the right bulk density out there. I have some producers, one producer in Lubbock, Texas, down in Plainview. He's been on strip tillage, but he's maintained an awful good soil health, and he produced about 1,700 pounds of lint cotton per acre. And for miles around him in 2011, it was the worst drought we've ever had in the state of Texas, and his neighbors produced nothing. If you want to call 50 pounds of lint per acre something, but that's about what they produce. But the interesting thing that I thought about it in visiting with that producer 2 days ago, he had a call from Capital Farm Credit, and they make obviously a lot of loans with producers. And he had been on this strip tillage system for 4 years, and his loan officer was telling him that he was basically the only one in that area where his financial assets had grown, he had making a crop, and had made some profit. And a lot of the farmers in that dryland area on the high plains of Texas, they're really suffering from what has occurred, particularly this last year with the drought and the extreme drought. Another interesting thing about doing with strip tillage, we see a lot of good uniformity in the crops and the yield of those crops. For example, with the cotton or whether it's grain sorghum, that production is just as good on the top of the plant as it is on the bottom of the plant, because you have so much healthier and vigor in those plants. The next thing that we have really watched is temperature and warming that seed bed zone to depths of 22 inches. We monitor all of that. We allow the soybean plant to accelerate its growth potential through strip tillage. We fertilize with products that are directly, and I do mean directly, in the root pathway, and we do this through strip tillage and RT&K and using hybrids. And the gentleman this morning was talking about those changes and the changes that are going on genetically. We feel like that's very important. And we're seeing a big decrease in plant populations and still maintaining and improving yields. And when you talk about those things, in my mind, being a half-time or part-time farmer, that's money in your pocket when you can save on some of this expensive seed. And then you're using your specific fertilizers, and good quality, high quality liquid fertilizers really kick up those yields. Yes, sir.
Looking at your picture there, it looks like you've got a lot of crusting and cracking issues in the topsoil. Is that typical, or is that just, could there be better management done on that?
I'm going to,
Sulfate or whatever?
that's a poor picture. That's going to be my cop-out on that. That's a very, very poor picture. So, but no, that is not the case of crusting on the soil surface, because we do maintain quite a bit of residue and organic matter in those, and the soil is very friable on the tip, and we're using some of Dr. Grossman's methods for looking at friability on the soil surface. And so the answer to your question is it doesn't quite look like that.
I noticed in your earlier slide that from over time that you've decreased the maturity. You went from what, 3.1s down to 2.8s process. What are you seeing there? Just shorter season rather than fuller season?
Yes, the shorter season and later planting
Later
days.
planting?
And later
Like
planting.
how much later?
2 weeks. Yes, sir.
When you're strip tilling, how do you, how do you overcome the root balls from the year before?
The what?
The root balls of, say, like a corn bean rotation, when you're strip tilling into the standing corn stalks, how do you deal with the root balls from?
On the surface or?
Yeah, 'cause I think you're not going through with a vertical tillage tool or anything like that.
Well, we push all the residue aside on the top surface, so we get all that out of the way to clean that up before we go on with the chiseler and the fertilizer applications and the roller basket. So we clean that surface off at that 10-inch surface at the top. We clean that all off with our equipment. We have a roller disc on the front that separate that out.
Do you go right on top of where the old root ball was, or do you offset?
We offset either 4 inches off, or we even recommend going in between the row. I'm done, I guess.
You had that one slide where you're cutting back your fertilizer rates by a third or more. Where did you come up with those numbers? What made you go to that?
Well, there's two things. There's one, it's a normal soils laboratory test, and then the thing we keep comparing it back to is broadcast fertilizing, where we're putting all the fertilizer spread out. We're reducing the amount and putting it precisely in the row, and that's where we get that reduction.
What about long term? Do you feel by reducing your rates, you're going to lower your soil test levels down, or
I
keep
think
the optimum levels?
I think two things are going to happen there, in my opinion, from what we're seeing, and we've discussed this quite a bit, is one, I think the fertility level and managing your organic matter and keeping that health up and keeping the pores and the earthworms and the mushrooms and all those kinds of neat things going with organic type of gardening or farming that's taking place. I think you're going to see those numbers drop. But I think also we need to look at a different way of taking the soil samples. We need to do it more in the row. We need to go deeper and get into those deeper pool of nutrients that are down 24 and 36 inches, because we're developing a different root system. But it's basically where you're doing it helter-skelter and scattering it versus putting it all in a nice, neat row with today's technology.
So you almost have to come up with new soil test standards then to
Yes.
lay that out, though, then?
Yes,
What you're saying?
definitely. Yes. I agree. And we're just now getting into really look, that's right. Yes, sir.
Are they using any calcium or lime?
No, sir. None.
Don't have to run those soils?
No. No.
Make a difference on where you're at.
I'm sure it makes a difference where you're at. I wouldn't argue or dispute that, but the research plots that we've got are the ones that I've been associated with from Nebraska, North Dakota, Minnesota, Colorado, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. We are not using any of those. So.
Your opening slide, you had a pretty good hill, like 4 to 7% slope. When you go to a strip till management, do you see that ground kind of pike to hold the yield, whereas a conventional till, it might drop off because it dries out?
You kind of caught me on that one. And my recommendation was to plant it on the contour and stop that that accelerated water erosion down that row. Even with a good amount of residue out there and having several thousand pounds of dry small grain equivalents out there, I think you're much better doing it on the contour and following some basic good conservation tillage rules. So again, you caught me on another poor slide there. So.
Did you do this on 30-inch rows?
Yes.
What about your yield's going to be a little less than if you had 15s?
I don't know. I do not
That's where
know.
you're at.
I don't know. That question I don't know. I have to do some homework on that one.
For your nitrogen, what do you use, ammonium nitrate or something else?
We're using ammonium thiosulfate, and we're really cranked up on that product. And I think one of the reasons in my mind is just the chemistry with that little bit of extra sulfur and adding that sulfuric acid creates a laxative type of thing on the soil and the soil continuum, and it seems to make the cation exchange capacity of those soils a lot more easily exchangeable on the nutrient exchange. But that's what we're using.
Have you done any work on cover crops?
Yes, sir. In what aspect? I'm a total believer in cover crops. Cover crops, particularly where I'm from, in the southern high plains, are very, very valuable from wind erosion. When you have wind erosion or water erosion, particularly with wind erosion, you're using not only valuable nutrients, you're losing valuable herbicides that obviously are being lost to the soil, to the air atmosphere and that type of thing. The biggest issue with cover crops is you got to have a rain to get it up and running and get it established. But we have found that with cover crops, up until they get to about 4 or 6 inches in height, they're really users of nutrients and soil water and moisture. But after that, if you have a way to manage that cover crop and desiccate it and those kinds of things, they're really beneficial for really getting quick organic matter and carbon back into that soil, which really adds to a lot of better crop production, wherever you're at. So I'm a strong believer in cover crops, and we do have some research that have just started with that.
Do you have more insect pressure in cover crop? More insect problems?
I'm going to answer a hard no, but you got to understand where I come from is cotton, because I was taught that if you don't take care of insects, for example, in a little 40-inch by 40-inch square, and you get a cotton boll weevil, overnight it'll infest a crop of 2,000 acres. And how do you manage something like that? To me, you got to be out there, like that farmer says, you got to have footprints on the land, looking at your crop and scouting constantly.
Have you ever had anybody use a old row crop cultivator to kind of work the strips in the springtime to warm them up or help warm them up?
Not that I know of. I'm not going to say that doesn't work. I just don't have experience with that. Yes, sir.
I've been strip tilling for 14 years, and I've never seen the time when you needed to do anything in the spring to that strip. That's in central Illinois.
Thank you.
And you strip till going into beets?
I've never done that. I go corn on corn, and I go corn on beets. When I'm strip tilling.
Well,
I've not done any strip tilling to raise beets.
Right. I know, according to Dr. Mike Howell and Dr. Archie Arborbright, one from Mississippi State University and the other one from Stiles Foundation, which is a real unique foundation. It's got to operate its own merits, and it's basically a standalone farming and ranching operation that the folks that get into strip tillage, once they look at it and taste it and feel it, they really are becoming get to be strong believers in this system and have really changed over. And the main reason is they just look at the plant conformation, the uniformity of the crop, and which leads to all these better things of yield and production.